Most people describe the weight of modern adulthood as a quiet exhaustion, a heavy Sunday night dread, or an autopilot grind through the working day. You stare at the ceiling at 3 a.m., feeling as if you are simply occupying a space in a routine you didn't design. Occasionally, you might drive past a park and clearly see someone sitting with their face tilted up toward the sun. For reasons you can't quite name, that sight of unhurried peace makes your eyes get wet. Labeling this persistent sense of wrongness as a chemical imbalance or a personal failure treats the symptom as the cause. The feeling of being trapped persists because the standard adult routine prioritizes predictability over human potential. We have standardized our lives to the point where survival is the only goal, leaving no room for the person we were actually designed to become. Society encourages us to seek the safety of the comfortable routine. We focus on paying the bills, keeping the world predictable, and avoiding the friction of change. In physics, entropy dictates that any system without continuous energy slides into chaos, as this visualization shows. Human growth follows this logic. Becoming requires constant exertion. When we stop reaching, our growth metrics flatline. Without effort, the mind shrinks. The comfort sold by our modern environment acts as an energy withdrawal mechanism. By removing the need for exertion, it essentially stops the growth process. We were designed for the continuous process of becoming. Stopping that process creates a state of biological and psychological stagnation that feels exactly like dying. This stagnation is physically encoded into our heads. To break out, we have to understand the biological hardware that keeps us trapped. Research on neuroplasticity, highlighted by Dr. Joe Dispenza, explains the exact mechanism of this cognitive trap. By the time the average person reaches age 35, 95% of their identity is a set of memorized behaviors. As this chart shows, the space for novel, conscious thought has dwindled to a tiny fraction of our daily experience. Within those 70,000 daily thoughts, we find a massive cyclical loop. 90% of the thoughts you have today are identical to the ones you had yesterday. The same fears, the same perceived limitations, and the same recycled complaints. This happens because the brain is an energy-intensive organ. Creating new neural pathways is biologically expensive. It is far cheaper to send electrical signals down deep, established grooves than it is to forge new ones. This drive for efficiency makes us highly vulnerable. Because the brain prefers the path of least resistance, it passively adopts whatever patterns or programming are most frequently presented by our environment. This environment is a relentless stream of screens, algorithms, and advertisements. This system of chaos exploits our biological preference for the familiar. Frequent loops of outrage, fear, and comparison literally carve physical architecture into the brain. Repetition transforms an external message into a neurological reality. A limiting belief like "I'm too old" or "I don't have enough" is a hardened, physical neurological pathway. It is a groove the brain can no longer easily step out of. Much of what we call our tastes or values were installed by external institutions before we were 12 years old. These systems prioritize compliance, not our individual potential. Most people spend their lives defending a personal identity that is actually a carbon copy program installed by someone else. For some, including many veterans, the first hurdle is literal survival, securing food, a roof, and physical safety. These are necessary, vital foundations. However, once that safety is met, a secondary trap emerges. The system encourages us to stay in survival mode by offering manufactured comforts that keep us in a numbed, reactive state. Survival is the prerequisite, but the real game of life is what you choose to build once your basic needs are handled. Breaking the mold requires forcing the brain to process entirely new thoughts. This visualization shows the exertion required to abandon the efficient path and forge a new neurological trajectory. Defeating entropy requires moving from a reactive life of default habits to a proactive life of intentional design. This proactive design requires a daily hustle. It begins by curating your mental diet, choosing the information that shapes your neurological architecture with the same care you would use for a sacred garden. Next, we must use the physical body. Movement and exposure to nature are tools that physically rewire the brain for resilience, turning the body into an instrument for growth. Finally, we utilize the spirit. Disciplines like silence and the rhythmic focus seen in the Sufi dervishes serve as a counterweight to the system's noise. The universe is built on the architecture of free will. Guidance is available, but the first step of initiation must come from you. Take one unprogrammed step today. Read one new book. Have one honest conversation with yourself. Decide that today is the day you step out of the line. Survival mode was never your intended destination. Your work isn't to create freedom, but to strip away the noise and remember that you were born with it.